Hinkle sent me that song on Thursday night, and I was so tired. And I said, okay, you need to hear this song, Valerie, because he sent it to you. You should be nice enough to pay attention, and leave the Yankees or the basketball or leave it all. It'll be there tomorrow. So I played the song. I was like, uh-oh, this one works for me for real, in the way of going before me. You know, sometimes where I come from, I like the song before me to work for me. So thank you again for that. So in keeping with the theme that the senior minister, the pastor gave us, we're looking at giving. And I went to Chronicles, First Chronicles. And I'll be real honest, in one of my research papers that I looked at with this particular book, the theologian starts out by saying, you know, a whole lot of people don't read this scripture. They don't even read this book. They're too bored with it. And I thought, okay, he must be talking about me. But then he says, but you know, it's a fascinating read. And it is. It actually works for my topic today. And so the thing about First Chronicles is found in the Old Testament or the First Testament, depending on how you want to say that. And it does something very similar to what in the New Testament the Gospels do. In the Gospels with Matthew, Luke, and you know, I'm a little slow. Matthew, Luke, and Mark, they tell the same story, yet a little uniquely different. Well, Chronicles does the same thing. First Chronicles tells the story about David. And it's in the story with David is found in 2 Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. And yet Chronicles is a little unique. One of the things that the writer of Chronicles, and they're not sure who it is, they give credit to Ezra, some give credit to Nehemiah. They're not clear. A lot of people go with the Ezra piece. But the thing that's unique about the writer, when he or she, well, we know it was he, wrote Chronicles, they decided to leave out the pieces on David, you know, with David's proclivities to warning other people's people, if you will, because David liked other folks that had their own partners. But the Chronicle writer left out that piece. The Chronicle writer wanted to give more of what they gave us, which is a history of what was happening, a detailed history of what was happening in David's life. Wanting to talk about David. And so some people say that Chronicles not only gives the story of David, it tells us about specifically, especially First Chronicles, David's gratitude for the gifts that God gave David and his family and to the people. Matter of fact, one writer says, First Chronicles shows us David taking up an offering in response to God's grace in his life. Taking up an offering in response to God's grace. And then it talks a little bit more. My particular pericope, my cluster of scriptures says in 1 Chronicles chapter 29, which is the last book in that testament there, that First Chronicle provides an individual and a collective amount of generous and joyous giving. Some even call this type of giving shalom-heartedly. I always love that word, shalom, meaning peace. Shalom-heartedly giving, meaning a heart filled with peace as you give. Thus, David and his people apparently did not give out of obligation. They did not give, apparently, to make themselves feel better. Nor did they give because they felt pressured to give. They gave willingly, because they were motivated to give. And let me just back up a little bit about this scripture. And you, when you get a chance, take a look at it. the writers and the researchers let us know that David, the greatest king, supposedly, at that time, he did a lot of conquests, and he had a lot of money. And apparently, he gave him his treasures. There's even a big poem in this section of David just thanking God for everything. But you know, what the researchers showed us is that they state that if you looked at what David gave in his time and compared it to what it would be worth today, it'd be over $5 billion, is what they said, that he gave begrudgingly, happily, joyously, peacefully. He gave. And one writer even said he gave it all. Well, I think there may have been a couple of reasons, this is my thought, that gave this willingness. They were motivated by two things, I think. First thing, and the writers let us know, and David says this. He says, everything I have comes from you. Nothing was mine originally. I got a lot of conquests. I'm living in a very palatial establishment, got 2 or 3 places to live. Whole bunch of people, concubines or whatever, that culture allowed at that time, wives and things of that nature. Yet I did not do it, not only that by myself, it's all yours anyway, because you allowed me to get it. None of it is mine, it's yours. So the first thing I think David understood or believed, none of this is mine. I'm just giving you what you really gave me in the first place. And this is not even talking about the 10%, with the tithing. Apparently, Chronicles said he gave it all. Just what we would say about $5 billion worth of everything. And he had a smile on his face when he did it. So that's the first thing that David does. He has this understanding. And then I think there's the second piece that really speaks to me, that David apparently had an individual memory and a collective one of God's blessings to him individually and to his people. Because the scripture as Janae read, the scripture told us that David gave and then his people gave. So I think that there's this understanding that individually, David accepted that God provided personal blessings for him, for his wealth, his conquests, his homes, his people, all those wars and situations he was in that he walked away from. The people in this room know about situations we walked away from. Personally, he understood that. For his family, for that, the people that was there with him, God not only, apparently in David's mind maybe, I don't know, but the writing seems to be, he appeared to felt good about the people. Oftentimes I say a prayer in the morning for God waking up my family members, those that are struggling, those that are in places they don't want to be. And I think individually, I go through the list of all of them. I just say thank you for letting them see another day. And maybe that's what, individually I think of David being blessed, and understanding that I personally understand God has done something for me. And I'm going to let you know I thank you for doing it for me. And then it appears that collectively, the people recognize, they had a historical and understanding of what God has done for the community. Once David and the Israelites remembered all that God did for them, they joyously and happily gave to build God's house. Interesting. Joyously and happily gave to build the temple. You know, he didn't live to see the temple built, yet he came to him. God said, no, your son will build the temple. And he did. Solomon built the temple. But he raised all the funds. They say that between what David gave and what the community gave, that temple, that building, to house the place where, one writer put it, the gathering with the church being a place where people can meet God and where future generations can learn of what God has done. It's almost like a Judson place. Judson was built in 1890. Here we are, a whole 100 years more, having an opportunity to recognize the social justice work, the place that initially the place here was for the Italian immigrants. And we understand, if you know the history, you understand they came and there was a lot of poverty. Yet the church is here. And then if you fast forward to the to the 80s, the 70s. I can't miss that one because it stays in my heart. I'm just fascinated by a pastor, and there are people here that were back then getting in a bus, going around looking for people that are considered women of the night, prostitutes, not to beat them up, offer them some hot chocolate and a ride to the hospital. That still works with my nerves. I'm amazed. That kind of hospitality, that kind of accepting another person whose lifestyle you may not know or like, yet letting them in. It just does something to me. And then we move on to the early 80s, and we know that this church was one of the first churches to not only be available to predominantly white gay men who had AIDS, this church was also available to the people who had AIDS from using needles, which were predominantly people of color. The church accepted, helped these individuals when other churches would look the other way. And then what we do now, so the sanctuary and the Black Lives Matter and the women's rights to choose and open and affirming, not just open, like where I was on Thursday, was open. They didn't want to affirm, and they had some issues. So, needless to say, but look at the history of a collective unit, almost like David's people. Look at the collectively. What good things, necessary things, the church allows over 100 and so odd years. The arts, the Judson house that was here for people that needed a place. The sanctuary, we had someone here last year that stayed here because he needed a place. The ministries, our own ability to do the pastoral hour piece. And we had a retreat this weekend, staff retreat, and Donna was saying about 5 to 10 years from now. Imagine having the church 5 to 10 years from now, a place for people that some parts of the society doesn't want to acknowledge. Still around, being able to do that kind of work. So I think that what David's scripture does, certainly First Chronicles does it for me on a personal level, and maybe that we at Judson could look at this. What individually, what situations, what blessings, what circumstances do you get from our interactions personally, individually, from our interactions and involvements at Judson Memorial Church? Do you have a memory lane to go down? I do. I have one. Just being able to Sometimes talk to someone. Or maybe just come here and don't be bothered and feel safe enough to sit and nobody bothers me because I'm going through. But does Judson give you some form of individual understanding of a smile on your face on why you're here? I know a woman told me once, here, I don't really come for the, all that church stuff. But I do like the cookies and the talking to people. That's still ministry, though. Because we're only here, what if they only come once a week for those 2 hours? At least they get that. Some people may have got a phone number. No, I won't say that. Did I just say that? Nothing wrong with that either, I guess. I'm not sure yet. But yet individually. And then I said collectively. There's so much. We could be here to December talking collectively. What do we get? What can we identify that we receive from Judson's existence? Like David was doing. The pastoral care, the programs that are here. The folks that come with that go out on Tuesday nights, that come in on Thursdays, that go, I remember at the LGBT march or the Pride march, and I was marching alongside people that I know are not gay. But they were marching along with me and everyone else and smiling, being able to know you can come and participate in recognizing that this is about uplifting people. So when we go down memory historical lane, we can see, perhaps, how our giving should willingly, happily, peacefully be gladly done. Perhaps we can see that. As David did. We don't have to necessarily give everything you have. We don't have to do that unless you have it that way and you want to. However, can we do what David and his people did? His community, his congregation. Can we give happily, joyously, in a phrase of shalom? Amen.